Hundreds of Australians are currently trapped on that cruise ship anchored off Japan, with doctors working around the clock to stop the spread of the coronavirus on board. 20 passengers have already been diagnosed, including 2 Australians, and they're only 3 days into their 14-day quarantine.
Well, joining us now is Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton and Deputy Opposition Leader Richard Marles. Good morning, gentlemen. Peter, if I can go to you first, has the government made any plans for an emergency evacuation for Australians on board the Diamond Princess?
Good morning, guys. No, obviously the Japanese authorities, they have an advanced health system. They're dealing with what's a very difficult situation. We're worried about whether other cruise ships and tour groups elsewhere might be affected as well. There are about 25 or 26 countries now that have been affected where there has been presentations of people with coronavirus. So it's a very serious situation, and it's why the government's taken the measures we have.
Can you be a little bit more specific about the areas of concern for you?
Obviously, still out of Wuhan province is the biggest concern for us at the moment. And on all of the medical advice, Carl, that's where most of the cases are presented. And obviously that city now has been cordoned off for a period now. And there are now 565 deaths, over 25,000 cases around the world. But the big concentration is within that province. Now, the question is whether or not other provinces within China will also close flights and shut down perimeter borders, but it is obviously a very serious situation for people in those areas, and for us, we're working with Australian citizens who have registered with DFAT to make sure that we can provide whatever assistance is possible. But I do reiterate this call. There are people travelling from Australia to China now, even though we've had in place travel advice, do not travel to China, and those people, frankly, are putting themselves in a difficult situation. They would find it very hard to get back to Australia in certain circumstances, and you can't guarantee their return, particularly if China shuts its borders. So we just need to deal with the reality of what's a very serious situation.
So basically what you're saying is, and you're open to nationals coming back from certain parts of China, what you're saying now is, and maybe you should be declaring it, you're not going to be allowed back if you go to those provinces, and it has to go for nationals, Australian nationals as well.
Well, Carl, I think the Prime Minister's been very clear. We just have to be realistic about the numbers involved here. We have to be realistic about the spread of this virus, which is, by all projections, going to continue at a significant rate. And when you've already got 25,000 people who have been infected with this virus, putting yourself into that zone makes for a very difficult situation.
Yeah.
Something else I wanted to talk to you both about this morning. There will be no federal investigation into Energy Minister Angus Taylor's alleged forgery of documents, which were referenced in a political attack against Sydney Lord Mayor Clover Moore last year. Of course, he said she spent $15 million on domestic and international travel when she had not. Now, the AFP has said there is no evidence the minister was involved in falsifying any information. They're not going to investigate further. Richard, are you satisfied with that?
Well, this is hardly a clean bill of health. I mean, there still needs to be an explanation from Minister Taylor and from the government about where this document came from and how the minister found himself, trying to peddle this document around in terms of getting a story up against a mayor in relation to their travel expenses, which in turn says everything about what this minister's not doing. I mean, for all the challenges that are facing this country, he's completely focused on a kind of low-rent student politics fight with the local council about their travel expenses rather than dealing with his Commonwealth portfolio. And that's the fundamental issue here.
Yeah. Yeah, it is still nonetheless, I mean, you're right, there are a lot more bigger issues going on, but it's still nonetheless important to hold account. The figures Minister Taylor relied on, Peter, from the Council's annual report were wrong. Shouldn't there be a responsibility on him to ensure those records are correct?
Well, Carl, it's a bit rich of the Labor Party to be complaining about the fact that this has been referred to the Federal Police when they referred it to the Federal Police without any evidence. So there's now been 10 referrals in total presided over by Mark Dreyfus, the Shadow Attorney General, and he uses it as a political stunt so that there's a dark cloud hanging over someone. Out of the 10, he's got none. I mean, nobody has been found to have a case to answer. The Federal Police have issued their statement to say that Minister Taylor doesn't have any case and that the matter has been finalised. And honestly, I mean, there's a presumption of innocence in this country, and to use these referrals to the Federal Police as a political point-scoring tactic not only wastes the time of the Australian Federal Police, but I think, frankly, undermines the credibility of people like Mark Dreyfus. And I think it should be called out. I think they should apologise, and they haven't done that yet.
But hang on, is the AFP saying he is cleared? I mean, basically they're saying there was
Yes.
a low level of harm caused, that he has apologised for it, and the resources that would be required to investigate just mean it's not worth factoring or processing or going ahead with.
But read the rest of the letter, though, Ali. It says that there's no evidence and that the matter's finalised. That's the advice from the Federal Police. They've looked at it. There is no evidence to indicate that Minister Taylor's guilty of any crime. And the presumption that he is, until he's proven innocent, is ridiculous. The police have investigated it. As I say, the referral to the police in the first instance was made by Mark Dreyfus. It wasn't initiated by the Federal Police. It was sent to the Federal Police because Mr Dreyfus wanted to try and taint Angus Taylor. Well, it's backfired on Mark Dreyfus and it's backfired on Labor.
Okay, can I just point something out behind you, Pete, on a much lighter note? How good is it to see the rain around? There's going to be lots of rain across Queensland, and unfortunately there's going to be a fair bit of flooding. Is the government getting ready for all that?
Well, firstly, mate, it's great to see the rain coming in this morning. It's just pretty widespread, and the great thing is that it's gone west as well. It's not drought-breaking in a lot of places, but hopefully in places like Warwick, there's water going into the dams, and those towns were on the cusp of running out of drinking water. So exciting, but yes, I mean, localised flooding, which, as you know, always happens in southeast Queensland and in northern New South Wales, is a concern, and we have had briefings and worked through what response we can provide if there is that flooding, and Emergency Management Australia has been doing that planning over the course of the last week or so.
Well, I mean, we're seeing plenty of rain about, but we've still got bushfires burning across the country. We've still got fireys out and about. Do both of you, considering we're here on Kangaroo Island, we're going to Bateman's Bay next week, do both of you have a message to our firefighters who are still out there and our SES workers who are now cleaning up after floods?
Well, Richard, you go first.
Well, yeah, look, I think the simple message is thank you, for all the work and the service and very sadly the sacrifice that has been made over the last few weeks. There is a nation that is enormously grateful to all of you, and this has been one of the most trying summers that our nation has seen. And the volunteers, the paid firefighters, the emergency service workers and members of the Australian Defence Force and their reserves have really stood out as the heroes of our nation. And I'm in Bateman's Bay right now, that you can see the devastation that's come through here. But as Peter said, the rain, which is happening here right now as well, is such a relief.
But the thing I'd add to that,
we're going
obviously,
to be in that neck of the woods in the next couple of... Go. Finish
Sorry,
up,
mate.
Pete. Thanks.
Sorry, mate. I obviously endorse all of the words. Thank you so much. But all of these volunteers live in communities like Kangaroo Island, Bateman's Bay, plenty of other areas, including across Victoria. They live in the communities, they work in the communities. What we need to do, please, is to support those local communities. If you're thinking about going away somewhere at Easter, do a driving trip through some of these local communities, spend money at the local hotel, the local motel, help support them and help them to rebuild if we can keep those economies going, because the last thing you want to do is see these volunteers lose hours in their full-time job or be put off because there's been a big downturn in that local community. So I think that's a really good way to help as well.